you off the top there, but we are back. Welcome back to viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm George Howell at CNN World Headquarters in Atlanta. And again, we start with the man who once led the FBI. He was fired by the U.S. president, grilled by Republicans on Capitol Hill, and now transcripts show exactly what James Comey had to say. Our Laura Jarrett has details for you.
In over 6 hours of testimony, the former FBI director went over familiar territory about the beginnings of the FBI's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election, saying he'd bet his life that special counsel Robert Mueller is handling it the right way, and suggesting you'd have to almost fire everyone in the FBI and the Justice Department to derail the relevant investigations at this point. But Comey also fact-checked the president on this claim that he's somehow best friends with Robert Mueller, saying, quote, "I have never hugged or kissed the man," and quote, "I admire the heck out of the man, but I don't know his phone number. I've never been to his house. I don't know his children's names." And while Comey's testimony did not shed new light about his views on whether the president obstructed justice in his firing last year, the testimony from another senior official at the FBI, former General Counsel James Baker, described how those at the highest level of the FBI were seriously concerned about Comey's firing. And finally, Comey was also asked to weigh in on Bill Barr, President Trump's pick for the next attorney general. And he said he thinks very highly of him, joking that, quote, "I probably just damned him by saying he's a friend of mine, but I respect him, and I think he's certainly fit to be attorney general." Laura Jarrett, CNN, Washington.
Laura, thank you. Now, as for Mr. Trump, he is now looking for Chief of Staff number 3, his current one being shown the door. General John Kelly, out of the job by the end of the year. Kelly first worked for the president as Secretary of Homeland Security, then became Chief of Staff, and he moved into that role to add discipline and order to the White House. But his relationship with the president steadily deteriorated. On Saturday, Mr. Trump said Kelly is a great guy and thanked him for his service. Listen.
John Kelly will be leaving at the end of the year. We'll be announcing who will be taking John's place. It might be on an interim basis. I'll be announcing that over the next day or two. But John will be leaving at the end of the year. He's been with me almost 2 years now, as you know, between the two positions. So we're probably going to see him in a little while.
Kelly's time as Chief of Staff has had its fair share of controversy. CNN's Ryan Nobles looks back at Kelly's embattled tenure.
John Kelly, the former Marine Corps general, was expected to bring a military-style sense of order to the White House.
As Chief of Staff.
That's right, sir.
Kelly quickly reined in access to the president, tried to control who could call Trump directly, and played a big role in staffing, as evidence of his quick disposal of former communications director Anthony Scaramucci, something Scaramucci is still sore over, as evidence from this interview on NBC's Meet the Press.
And he's hurt the president, and he has hissy fits.
But within weeks, Kelly was forced to confront a series of controversial moves by President Trump that left the White House reeling. In the wake of the racially charged riots in Charlottesville, Kelly was photographed in the background of Trump Tower, looking dour as Trump spoke.
I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
Kelly had urged the president to offer a more forceful condemnation of the white supremacists involved, but Trump did not take the advice. The relationship really started to unravel during the public relations disaster surrounding former staff secretary Rob Porter. Porter was accused of abuse by 2 ex-wives. Kelly initially defended him. The president personally blamed his chief of staff for the fallout. Despite the hiccups, the president repeatedly sang Kelly's praises on Twitter and pushed back on reports that he was unhappy with his work.
He's doing a great job. He will be here, in my opinion, for the entire 7 remaining years.
Behind the scenes, it was a different story. In Bob Woodward's book, Fear, the veteran journalist quotes Kelly as describing Trump as a, quote, idiot, and also said, "We're in crazy town. I don't even know why any of us are here. This is the worst job I've ever had." Kelly later called that, quote, BS, and Trump said publicly he believed him. Their public pronouncements aside, the tension inside the West Wing was obvious. Kelly recently got into a heated shouting match with National Security Advisor John Bolton. And now that it may be finally the end of his tenure, Kelly and the president are no longer speaking. For Kelly, leaving this job may actually come as a welcome relief.
The last thing I wanted to do was walk away from one of the great honors of my life, being the Secretary of Homeland Security. But I did something wrong, and God punished me, I guess.
Ryan Nobles, CNN, Washington.
Just very briefly.
Let's talk more about this now with Peter Matthews. Peter, a professor of political science at Cypress College, joining us via Skype this hour. Peter, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Let's start with the former FBI Director James Comey's testimony. How much impact do you believe it will have, and did we really learn anything new there?
Nothing new, but it was the reiteration of it was very good because it showed that the rule of law is extremely important, not just for Comey, but for all of us. And Comey warned against us getting numb at the attack on the rule of law. The Republicans were only interested in just going after Hillary Clinton's emails once again. So there was quite a contrast there between Comey's approach and the Republican leadership on the committees.
With regards, though, to Comey's comments about Robert Mueller, that if Mueller were fired, that it wouldn't derail these investigations, or would the impact, in your view, be more significant?
I think he's got a point because Mr. Mueller has farmed out a lot of the work to places that cannot be touched. For example, the Southern District of New York, they've got a lot of information he's already given to them, and they're already acting on it. So if he were to be fired, there are other avenues that have been opened, and there are institutions that are working forward on this issue, and the investigation will not stop. And I think that Mr. Trump will still be in jeopardy for what he may have done already. So I'm not worried about Mueller getting fired.
Another big headline out of the Trump White House is that the Chief of Staff John Kelly is on his way out the door, this revolving door out of the Trump White House. The two reportedly are not even speaking to each other, Peter. So how big of an impact will this have on the Trump White House, in your view?
Well, it's going to have an impact because he was brought in, the Chief of Staff was brought in to bring stability to the White House. And for a while he did that. He was able to make sure that people coming in to meet the president were actually cleared for it, and it was all organized. But the president had a very freestyle, winging it type of manner where he didn't really like that kind of organization. And that's one reason they clashed. The two of them clashed on the process and the procedures of this. And I think that it could happen once again that even with a new chief of staff, the president's personality is such that he is not really into having an organized, methodical way of doing things. That can be a real problem, and it can be a very completely unsettled White House once again, no matter who's in the chief of staff position.
Peter, you talk about these various investigations being farmed out into different places. Let's focus on those court filings and the new insight we're getting into these investigations. It shows there is a lot of smoke for sure, and even goes as far as implicating individual number one as the alleged mastermind that led criminal activity. Individual one, we understand, is the President of the United States. But a lot of smoke, Peter, but is there a smoking gun from what you see?
I think we've come the closest to having a smoking gun at this point, George. Matter of fact, has the term unindicted co-conspirator come to mind? Because that's what happened in the Watergate era, when the Watergate grand jury actually labeled President Nixon as an unindicted co-conspirator, which means someone who has actually conspired illegally with someone else to commit a crime or to use illegal means to achieve a legal end, as Trump has done apparently, according to these reports. He actually directed Cohen, according to Cohen, and I think that the Southern District of New York attorneys would not even put this forth in the terminology if they didn't have corroborating evidence. It's very serious right now, because if he has conspired with Cohen to pay off Stormy Daniels and to pay off Ms. McDougal, that's a very serious crime. That's a felony right there. And I think this is the closest we've come to a smoking gun. That's the way I look at it.
Peter Matthews, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, George.
We now know that the president's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner has reportedly been advising the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman privately since the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. All of this according to the New York Times reporting. Kushner has counseled the Crown Prince on how to weather the storm of the international outrage as gruesome details came to light about the killing. The Saudis deny the Crown Prince played any role in Khashoggi's murder, but last week, U.S. senators came out of a classified CIA briefing convinced that the Crown Prince was behind it. My colleague Ana Cabrera spoke with one of the reporters who broke the Kushner story. Listen.
Since Khashoggi's killing, we report that he's continued these messaging conversations with Mohammed bin Salman, and some of the advice he's given is unclear, but it's our understanding that he has been advising him to settle some of his problems in the region, within the kingdom, avoid mistakes, that clearly the killing of Khashoggi was more than a mistake, but he sees MBS as someone who is the future, and I think an important ally to the United States.
The reported one-on-one conversations and text messages between Kushner and the Crown Prince were in apparent disregard of White House protocols that require a member of the national security staff to be included in any communications with foreign officials. The White House did not respond to CNN's request for comment, but a spokesperson told the New York Times this: Jared has always meticulously followed protocols and guidelines regarding the relationship with Mohammed bin Salman and all of the other foreign officials with whom he interacts, end quote. The Saudis have offered varying and sometimes contradictory accounts of Khashoggi's killing from the day he disappeared after he went into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. They first denied that he was even missing. Only later did they admit that he was dead, supposedly killed by rogue operatives. The White House and U.S. State Department say the U.S. has not reached a conclusion, but last month the CIA assessed Khashoggi's murder that it was personally ordered by the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. In touch with you. Let's talk now more about this with Bruno Cotrez. Bruno, a professor of political science at Sciences Po, joining us via Skype this hour from Tunis, Tunisia. On Twitter, he essentially said people don't want to pay large sums of money in order to maybe, he says, protect the environment. But what does this say about the will of working people to pay for the clean economy? And if not through tax, how can governments adjust to reach these goals?
Oh, you know, it's not like only France. I think that in most industrial societies and countries, we have a
cliffhanger at the cliffs of Dover, I should say. Why the port town is feeling anxious about leaving the EU.
Take with a sufficient slice of the American electorate and the Senate to keep him out of ultimate hot water.
Harry Lippman, thank you again for your time.
Thanks for having me, George.
Now to the United Kingdom, where it's like that show Deal or No Deal. The British Prime Minister, Theresa May, facing a key vote on Tuesday as she tries to get Parliament on board to approve her Brexit plan. Let's go live to London. CNN's Hadas Gold following the story in our London bureau. And Hadas, right now, it seems that she does not have the votes.
No, George, it seems more and more Theresa May is on her own as she tries to convince more members of Parliament to get on board with her plan and vote in favor of that deal on Tuesday. But not only does she seem on her own here in London, I went to Dover, a beautiful part of southeast England, which voted heavily in favor of Brexit. And I have to say the public there seemed just as skeptical of her deal. Take a listen. The White Cliffs of Dover, the symbol of Britain's frontier with Europe, today battered by a storm. Just as Theresa May tries to weather political turbulence back in London. This vital port, which handled a record 2.6 million trucks last year, could be approaching a no-deal cliff's edge if Parliament votes down the Prime Minister's deal. At a town favorite, the Devorian, locals and dock workers gather for a traditional English breakfast. And like the 62% of people here who voted for Brexit in 2016, many of them just want to leave, no matter the terms.
I don't know, there shouldn't be no re-vote. We voted out, so we'll stay out. Yeah, that's it.
I think Theresa May's deal is a very poor one. It doesn't mean leaving. We're tied into a backstop no one can understand, and we should leave, no deal, no problem. And if the traffic is held up at Dover, it will also be held up at Calais. How long do you think the French will put up with that?
Government officials and businesses have warned of chaos, from miles of freight waiting for customs checks to bodies piling up in morgues if there's no Brexit deal. No matter the outcome in London, this area will bear the brunt of that result. But for the majority here who voted to leave the European Union, just 22 miles across this channel, they just want the politicians to get on with it. Out of the rain and up the road at the Astor Community Centre in Deal, the monthly tea dance attracts a mix of Remainers and Leavers. But what unites them, aside from teaching newcomers how to dance, their frustrations with the Brexit process.
No deal at all? Oh, no, that's fine. It's absolute nonsense because I'm old enough to remember, about nearly 40 years when we weren't in Europe. So we just go back to that. We just go back to square one.
Unfortunately, we've got the wrong Prime Minister, although I voted for her doing it. I just think whatever happens next week, and I don't think she'll get through, I just think we're going to end up with a mess.
Little confidence here in Theresa May's plan. Remain or leave, deal or no deal, foxtrot or the waltz, the people of Southeast England are feeling out of step with the politicians. And George, Theresa May today was continuing to ratchet up the alarm bells about what would happen if her deal does not pass on Tuesday. She said that it would cause a lot of uncertainty for the country and warned members of her own party and other members of parliament for something that they might seem as even worse, a Labour leader like Jeremy Corbyn taking over as Prime Minister. George.
Welcome back to CNN Newsroom. I'm George Howell. A major winter storm is creating dangerous conditions for millions of people across the southern and central U.S. Take a look here at the Texas Panhandle. This is what people in Lubbock, Texas are waking up to this weekend. The city blanketed in more than 10 inches or 25 centimeters of snow in just one day. That's more than Lubbock usually gets in an entire year. Let's talk more about all of this with our Karen McGinnis. Karen, a lot of snow, and it's moving this way.
And when you see pictures like that, some people say, oh, I want my children to see the snowfall.
Yeah.
Well, if you're planning on driving and letting kids look at the snowfall, it is going to be crazy dangerous. Let's show you once again those pictures coming out of Lubbock. And this is the 6th time since 1911 that they have seen double-digit snowfall totals for one day. And you can imagine just how treacherous this was. And state troopers all across the Carolinas are looking at the road conditions there. Charlotte being one of those areas. Want to show you high-res forecasts on what we anticipate that radar will look like. Storm system is going to move moderately slowly, but in its wake, the rainfall in the warm sector of this system, but plenty of cold air that's diving to the south on the ridge of a high pressure. That low pressure system further to the south, kind of a complex conglomeration of events taking place here. So we've got some overrunning moisture as well as some cold air that's going to be digging in underneath that. Boone, North Carolina. That 41 centimeters translates to about 16 inches of snowfall. Now, for Charlotte, I looked at it earlier. It looked like it was going to be significant snowfall. Right now, we're expecting maybe 3 to 5 centimeters of snowfall there. Asheville, one of those areas tucked into the Piedmont and the mountains of North Carolina. If you are traveling across the southern Appalachians up into the central Appalachians, that's the area that will be hardest hit. Power outages could be for days because this isn't just a snow event. It's a wind event, and it's also a sleet, ice, wintry mix event, and it has delayed flights to the tune of about 1,300 out of the Charlotte Douglas International Airport. But we have seen just widespread areas where the rain has been very heavy as well. In Charleston, South Carolina, they're saying because of the high tide and the heavy rainfall, the downtown area of Charleston could be significantly flooded. So it's not just a snow event, Bob. That's the big part. But it's also a rain and wind and ice event as well, George.
All right, we'll have to stay in touch with you, Karen. Thank you. Now, coming up on CNN, you will meet 10 remarkable trailblazers who have truly changed the world, the CNN Heroes. Their efforts will be celebrated during CNN Heroes, an all-star tribute. It airs live this Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's Monday morning in Asia, only here on CNN. And